Hello, my name is Jaru. Today I'm talking about Arcane. There will be major spoilers for the entirety of Arcane Season 1 in this video, so go watch it before watching this. This show is a masterpiece. Now, unlike my usual content, this video is going to be short and sweet, because I don't want to spend too long making it. Arcane is a great show for a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is its phenomenal character writing. All the characters feel realistic, nuanced, and engaging, and that includes Vi. Vi, as the protagonist, is a fantastic depiction of the headstrong freedom fighter, which is to say she's full of self-righteous anger and not much common sense. She acts on emotion instead of logic, and it gets her into a lot of trouble, although it also endears her to people who can see she has a good heart. For a while now, I've seen a lot of people coming out as a big fan of Vi as a character, and I can totally understand why. She is a strong female character who is actually well written, has pink hair, big muscles, epic action sequences, and a lesbian girlfriend. As such, her being popular was pretty much inevitable, and I had no issue with that. I was a little bothered that people were kinda giving her a pass on some of her pretty huge mistakes, but that was to be expected. It's a well-known fact that in a story with a protagonist and an antagonist, the audience will be much more likely to look upon the sins of the protagonist in a more forgiving and positive light because you're supposed to be rooting for them. That is just the natural way that people engage with a story. So even though Vi was regarded more kindly than I thought was fair, I accepted that. That is, until I saw a particular hot take online that I found so egregious that I felt the need to make this video and add my voice to this conversation. I saw people unironically claiming that Silco, not Vi, was responsible for the creation of Jinx, and that when Jinx says outright that it is in fact Vi's fault, these people claimed Jinx was wrong. This pushed me over the edge and forced me to make this video, because calling Vi a cool character in spite of her many flaws was one thing, but going so far as to deny Vi's greatest sin is such an insanely disingenuous representation of this story that it actually made me angry. So today I'm here to set the record straight. Now, as much as I'd like to explain how Vi has ruined the lives of literally everyone she encounters, because she really does ruin everyone she encounters, I don't want to spend that much time on a video that might not do so well. So instead, I'm going to narrow the focus and just look at all the ways in which Vi ruined Powder's life in particular. Let's get into it. Starting in episode 1, Vi took Powder through a battlefield which not only risked their lives, but also forced Powder to see countless corpses, including that of her parents. This is where we see Powder visualizing these scratchy images of people's faces for the first time, which is a visual effect that the show uses to represent Powder's mental illness. This confirms just how traumatic this event was for Powder, and it's entirely Vi's fault for bringing her here. And then, instead of comforting her sister, Vi is too caught up in her own rage to actually support Powder, which you will soon realize is a running theme in their relationship. Vi then repeatedly dragged Powder along on these criminal enterprises despite her being a kid, while simultaneously teaching Powder that stealing from innocent people is just a totally normal and acceptable thing to do, especially if they're Topsiders. I sure hope that doesn't come back to cause catastrophic damage to the entire city. In addition, Powder nearly falls to her death during this, so that makes this the second instance of Vi endangering her sister's life in a single episode. This robbery was all Vi's idea, and it sets in motion all of the terrible things that soon happen in this show, which includes all the terrible things that are about to happen to Powder. Vi then picked this very much avoidable fight with this gang of teens and threw the bag of stolen goods at Powder, setting her up to lose them later on. The first sin here is Vi teaching Powder to use violence instead of diplomacy, even when diplomacy is an option. So all those times Jinx leaps straight to violence instead of talking things out can be traced right back to Vi. The second sin comes in the form of forcing Powder into the role of protector of the stolen goods, a job that she is clearly unprepared for, thus leading to her losing those goods. Milo makes it clear that stuff like this happens frequently, which means Vi has repeatedly brought Powder on these sorts of missions. She then forces responsibilities on Powder that she can't handle, and when Powder inevitably fails to handle these responsibilities because she's a child, it causes repeated damage to Powder's self-confidence and self-image. The entire reason that Powder feels like she ruins everything is because Vi keeps forcing her to do these jobs. Powder's feelings of inadequacy and obsession with earning people's approval is entirely rooted in Vi's horrible treatment of her. Also, Vi assigning Powder to be the guardian of stolen goods would set her down the path to being the person in charge of guarding Silco's stolen goods, and we all know how poorly that goes. Vi then encouraged Powder to build and use nail bombs against other children, meaning Vi, not Silco, was the first person to put a weapon in her hands and encourage using deadly force. Look through this show. Look at all these scenes of Jinx ending lives and causing suffering with her bombs. Now, next time you feel pain as you see these people getting slaughtered, remember exactly who it was that told Powder that creating bombs was her special talent. Vi then told Powder to keep the arcane crystals a secret from Vander, which not only nearly got them arrested multiple times and put everyone in the Undercity at risk, but it also gave Powder the weapon that would cause the death of their entire family. If Vi hadn't done any of the things I've discussed thus far, her family would still be alive. Remember that this robbery was what pushed Silco to kidnap Vander, so literally all of this is on Vi. And yet, despite this all being Vi's fault, Powder is the one who gets saddled with the guilt. Also, have you ever thought about why Vi told Powder to keep these crystals a secret from Vander, even though Vander literally told her that keeping these would tie them to the crime? It's because of Vi's pride. Vi is so obsessed with striking back at the Topsiders and proving Vander wrong that she refuses to give the crystals up. It's not even like Vi wanted to use the crystals for anything. She just wanted to spite Piltover. This is such a terrible and selfish decision on Vi's part, and she puts the cherry on top by having Powder hold onto these crystals. And this ultimately ends up being Powder's undoing, which means that, once again, Vi is setting Powder up for inevitable failure. Vi then puts forth the idea of getting this city to respect us, meaning she was building that obsession with getting respect from the Topsiders into Powder long before Silco got her hands on her. Powder's desperation for respect and approval is what caused her to take those crystals to try and help Vi and Vander, which is yet another consequence of Vi's terrible influence on her. Also, the entire reason that Powder felt confident enough to ignore Vi's orders and follow them was because Vi constantly disobeyed her authority figure as well. Meaning that all the times Jinx strikes off from Silco and does horrible things on her own is due to her lack of respect for authority that Vi programmed into her. Then there's this tragic scene. Vi held aloft Powder's fragile self-confidence, repeatedly telling her that she's ready to go on all these petty criminal missions, only to tell her she's not ready to help them on an extremely important mission to save their father. This shatters Powder's self-image. That's why we see Powder having a breakdown after they leave. This was Vi revealing to Powder that despite everything she said, she views Powder the same way Milo does, as a liability. In one sentence, Vi undoes all of the emotional support she had given to Powder, which understandably fractures the emotionally fragile child. You know who else props up their loved ones only to rip away their support structure whenever it suits them? Toxic people. People in toxic relationships perform this kind of emotional abuse. Vi repeatedly set Powder up for failure by sending her on these missions, repeatedly damaged her self-confidence, and then delivered the final blow to her self-image with this one cruel line. What a nightmare. Powder was an abused and traumatized mess of a human being long before Silco encountered her. And of course, after all these horrible things Vi subjected Powder to, she then assaults her, calls her a Jinx, which confirms all of Powder's worst fears about herself, before finally abandoning her next to the corpse of their father, putting the final nail in Powder's psychological coffin. And before you go waggling your finger at Powder for causing this tragedy, let me remind you that everything Powder does wrong in this scene was programmed into her by Vi. Vi insisted she was ready for these missions, encouraged her to build bombs, showed her that defying the orders of her authority figure is totally acceptable, gave her the weapon she used to kill them all, and gave her the obsession with approval and fragile self-worth that forced her to try and save their family in the first place. Everything Powder does in this scene is Vi's fault. Vi horrifically victimized Powder her entire life. I'm not going to say Silco had a healthy relationship with Jinx, but claiming he created Jinx is objectively wrong. The foundation for her psychosis was engineered by her toxic relationship with Vi far in advance. Vi, not Silco, was the one to give her bombs, trauma, self-doubt, obsession with approval, no moral compass, the desire to use violence before diplomacy, emotional abuse, and physical abuse. Oh, that's right, I almost forgot to touch on the direct physical abuse Vi inflicted on Powder. If psychologically torturing her younger sister wasn't enough, it's implied she has a history of assaulting her as well. You may have thought this punch was just a moment of weakness for Vi, and that she would never do this in normal circumstances, but oh brother, is that not the case. In the Imagine Dragons Arcane music video, we get a sequence in which it cuts back and forth between the sisters pillow fighting and Vi screaming in Powder's face. It then cuts to Powder falling to the floor before we see Vi angrily knocking over furniture. The message is extremely clear. Vi, at best, threw her sister to the floor and at worst punched her to the floor, just like she did in episode 3. And then, just to hammer home that this is abuse, we then cut to Powder crying. So, make no mistake, this assault by Vi was not a moment of weakness. This was just the latest abuse in a history of abuse. Silco may have had an unhealthy relationship with Jinx, but it doesn't even hold a candle to the sheer quantity of physical and psychological torture that her own sister inflicted on her. Once you realize how obscenely toxic this relationship is, it makes all the scenes of Jinx desperately hoping for Vi to be her sister again that much more horrifying. Jinx is obsessed with her abuser, and it should make you sick to your stomach. It's ironic that people compare Jinx to Harley Quinn, because she is in a toxic relationship, it's just not with Silco. In a morbidly hilarious twist, Vi is the Joker to Jinx's Harley Quinn. Also, I just want to point out that Silco was there for Jinx at her lowest point, saved Jinx's life after she nearly died, and never once laid an angry finger on her, whereas Vi is directly responsible for manufacturing every tiny element of Powder's psychosis, abandoned her when she needed Vi the most, and she did all this after assaulting her and damaging her psyche irreparably. The worst thing Silco did was encourage Jinx's destructive behaviors, but those behaviors were all in place before he ever met her thanks to Vi. Think about it. What was it that made Silco such a terrible relationship for Jinx? It was him encouraging her use of deadly explosives, encouraging her to use violence against innocent people, and using her abilities to help him in his criminal enterprise. And guess what? The very first episode has Vi encouraging Powder to use deadly explosives, encouraging her to use violence against innocent people, and using her abilities to help Vi in her criminal enterprise. And don't even try to argue that Vi was doing it all for the greater good, because that's the exact same argument Silco uses to justify his evil actions as well. Oh, and Vi calling Powder a Jinx wasn't even a one-time event either. Not only did she call her that in this scene, but when Vi gets before the council, the highest authority in the land, not only does she rat out her sister to them, which directly causes the peace deal between Piltover and Zahn to fall through, she also calls her Jinx in the process. Why would you tell them that your own sister is responsible? Why would you call her Jinx? What the hell is wrong with you, Vi? And lastly, just to put a bow on the whole Vi versus Silco debate, when Vi's whole world came crashing down around her ears thanks to Powder, the monster she created, her response was to assault, traumatize, and victimize her own sister. That was her first instinct. By contrast, when Silco's whole world came crashing down around his ears thanks to Jinx when she, murdered him, his response was to use his dying breath to give her the encouragement he knew she would need to get past her trauma from killing him. His first instinct was to support her to the bitter end. So make no mistake. When it comes to who did the most damage to the world or the city or just the people around them, Silco has Vi beat. But when it comes to who did the most damage to Powder, Vi is in a league of her own. That is why Vi is a horrifically toxic sister.